It was our wedding anniversary, the day my wife by contract, Isabella Sterling, picked up her childhood sweetheart from the airport. I was holding a thermos of soup I'd made for her. Standing at the back of the crowd, I was just an irrelevant shadow. His name was Julian Davenport, dressed in a bespoke suit, a paint pipe on his wrist, glinting arrogantly under the terminal lights. The moment he saw me, a contemptuous smirk spread across his handsome face. "Leo, you're still hanging around Isabella after 3 years. A stay-at-home husband. If you're not embarrassed, I'm embarrassed for her." My marriage to Isabella Sterling began with a contract. 3 years ago, the Sterling family patriarch on his deathbed demanded that Isabella, a notorious workaholic, get married. To silence the gossip and to carve out a quiet space to continue ruling her massive business empire, she chose me. My name is Leo Vance, an orphan, no family to speak of. After college, I was working as a junior clerk at some faceless company in Queens, grinding away for a tiny salary, living in a shoebox apartment where you could practically shake hands with your neighbor through the window. My only assets, I suppose, were that I was decent looking and knew how to cook. Our meeting was a carefully orchestrated accident. Isabella's assistant found me. She made an offer I couldn't refuse. A 3-year marriage contract, the right to live in a sprawling penthouse in the heart of Manhattan, and a monthly household fund of $50,000. All I had to do was play the part of Mr. Sterling when necessary. For the man I was back then, it was like winning the lottery. I signed without hesitation. The day we got our license at City Hall, the clerk looked at us with utter confusion. One was the Ice Queen gracing the cover of Forbes. The other was a nobody in a pair of faded jeans. We looked like we were from 2 different planets. Isabella was stone-faced the entire time, barely saying a word. The moment the certificate was in her hand, the first thing she said to me was, "Leo, remember the agreement. This is my private number. Only call it if you're facing a situation you can't handle." Then she slipped into a black Bentley and was gone, leaving me standing there, lost in the city wind. Just like that, I went from a corporate drone to a trophy husband in a gilded cage. We moved into the penthouse at the Allian Tower, a duplex with 360-degree floor-to-ceiling windows that drank in the entire city skyline. The apartment was huge, but it was cold. Isabella gave me a supplementary credit card and told me to use it as I wished, but we slept in separate rooms. Her in the master suite, me in a guest room at the end of a long hallway that felt like an uncrossable chasm. For 3 years, we executed the terms of our contract perfectly. I played the part of a beautiful house husband. I knew she had serious stomach issues and worked herself to the bone. So, I learned to cook a variety of healthy, soothing breakfasts, which I'd pack in an insulated container and have delivered to her office. I knew she was a light sleeper, sensitive to the slightest sound or light. So, I took over all the household chores and learned to walk on tiptoe. I knew her hands and feet were always cold in the winter. So, every night before she came home, I placed a heated blanket in her bed and brew a pot of hot ginger tea with honey. She saw everything I did. She would say a polite thank you. On my birthday, she'd have her assistant send over an expensive watch. On holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas, she'd play the part of a loving wife with me at Sterling family gatherings. But that was it. We were as courteous and distant as strangers sharing a lease. She never asked about my past, and I never pried into her work. The most intimate we ever got was when in front of her grandfather, she would allow me to hold her hand. It was soft but cool, completely devoid of warmth. I thought our lives would continue like this until the 3-year contract expired. We would go our separate ways, no strings attached. But I had overestimated myself. In the day in day out routine, in the countless meals I cooked for her, in the quiet nights I waited up for her, leaving a single lamp on in the darkness, I had hopelessly, irretrievably fallen in love with this woman who was so cold on the outside, but so lonely within. I knew it was ridiculous. I was a hell. I wasn't even a lover on contract. I was more like a butler on contract. What right did I have to love her? I buried those unacceptable feelings deep in my heart, hoping only to get through the last few months in peace until Julian Davenport showed up and shattered all my pathetic illusions. 02. After that unpleasant first meeting at the airport, the atmosphere at home grew even more strained. Isabella seemed busier than ever, constantly leaving early and coming home late, sometimes not at all. And Julian Davenport was like an annoying fly, buzzing his way into our lives at every opportunity. He'd show up unannounced with expensive gifts, claiming he was just there to see Isabella. Every time he would sit on the Italian leather sofa in the living room, the one I never dared to sit on, and survey the apartment with a judgmental eye. "Leo, Isabella's tastes haven't changed. Still loves her pour-over Jamaican Blue Mountain, he'd say, holding the cup of coffee I had just made, acting as if he were the master of the house. Leo, king crab, is in season. Why are you feeding Isabella this frozen seafood casserole? It's just so cheap, he'd criticize, pointing at the dinner I'd spend an hour preparing. Leo, I have to ask. You're a grown man. Don't you have any ambition beyond slaving away in a kitchen? Isabella is an incredible woman. Do you really think you deserve her? Every word he spoke was a boot stomping on my self-worth. All I could do was stay silent because he was right. I had no defense. In their world, at the top of the pyramid, I was a useless nobody. One day, Julian showed up again, this time with some flashy influencer type in tow claiming she was going to perform a tea ceremony for us. I was in the kitchen making soup when I heard Isabella's ice-cold voice from the living room. Julian, this is my home, not your private club. If you're here as a guest, you're welcome. If you're here to show off, the door is over there. Julian sounded embarrassed. Isabella, don't get me wrong. I just wanted to liven things up a bit. I don't need things livened up, Isabella said, her voice flat. And in the future, call before you come over. My husband doesn't like a lot of strangers in the house. In that instant, my hand holding the soup ladle trembled. My husband, she had done again. She had asserted my position in front of Julian. After being thoroughly rebuffed, Julian sulkily left with the influencer. That evening, for the first time in ages, Isabella didn't lock herself in her home office. She sat down at the dinner table. I served her a bowl of nourishing chicken soup. She drank it quietly, then suddenly said, Leo, don't take anything Julian says to heart. I was stunned for a moment, then managed a weak smile. I'm fine, Miss Sterling. She frowned, clearly displeased with the title. At home? Call me by my name. Okay, Isabella. The name felt foreign on my tongue. He just got back to the States. He doesn't understand a lot of things, she said, setting down her bowl. She looked at me, her beautiful eyes holding an emotion I couldn't decipher. You are good. My heart skipped a beat. It was the first time in 3 years she had ever complimented me. Just 3 words, but they sent a wave of warmth through my entire body. I could feel my cheeks burning and quickly looked down, pushing the rice around in my bowl. You should eat before the soup gets cold, I mumbled. She hummed in agreement, and we finished the meal in silence. But for the first time, the suffocating chill in the air seemed to have thawed just a little. However, that tiny spark of joy was quickly extinguished by a harsh dose of reality. 03 Isabella's best friend, Chloe Bennett, a fiery eyes with a personality to match, called Isabella directly. I happened to be cleaning the floor nearby and heard every word clearly. Bella, what the hell is your problem? Chloe's voice shrieked through the phone. Julian is finally back and you're still protecting that nobody you keep at home. Wasn't the whole point of that stupid contract to get your grandfather off your back and wait for Julian to come home? The real deal is here now. What are you waiting for? Kick that Leo guy to the curb and go marry Julian? Her sharp, impatient words made my heart sink. So that's what everyone thought. I was just a placeholder, a tool to be discarded when no longer needed. My 3 years of devotion were nothing but a pathetic one-man show. On the other end of the line, Isabella was silent for a long time. So long, I thought she was agreeing with Chloe. Just as my heart turned to ash, she spoke, her voice quiet, but firm as steel. Chloe, I'll say this one last time. Leo is my husband, not a placeholder, and I was never waiting for Julian. If you ever say anything like that again, we're done. She hung up the phone. The living room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I stood frozen, feeling like a thief who had overheard a secret he was never meant to know. Isabella turned, her gaze landing on me. Her expression was a complex mix of apology, frustration, and a flicker of something like determination. You heard all that? She asked. I nodded, my throat dry. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's okay, I said, forcing a smile that felt more painful than crying. She was just telling the truth. No, she wasn't. Isabella stood up and walked toward me. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere lounge set, which softened the sharp edges she usually carried in the corporate world. She stopped right in front of me, looked me straight in the eye, and said, enunciating every word, Leo, to me, you were never just a placeholder. My heart hammered against my ribs again, but my rational mind screamed at me not to get my hopes up. She was probably just saying that to save face. After all, having a husband who was looked down upon by her own best friend and childhood sweetheart reflected poorly on her, the great Isabella Sterling. A few days later, Sterling Industries held a massive gala to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the company going public. As the CEO's legal husband, my attendance was required. It was my first time at such a high-end event. The ballroom was breathtaking with crystal chandeliers dripping from the ceiling and a sea of tuxedos and evening gowns. Everyone wore a polished, distant smile, talking about stocks and futures I knew nothing about. Dressed in the designer suit Isabella's assistant had sent over, I felt like an ugly duckling who had stumbled into a flock of swans. My only job was to be a silent, unobtrusive backdrop and not embarrass her. Isabella was devastatingly beautiful that night. She wore a mermaid-style gown in deep crimson that clung to her perfect figure, a brilliant diamond necklace gracing her neck. With her hair swept up, she was the undisputed center of attention. Business moguls flocked to her, champagne flutes in hand. Meanwhile, she had stationed me in a quiet corner where I was methodically working my way through the dessert table. Well, if it isn't Mr. Vance, hiding out here all by yourself," a snide voice said behind me. I turned to see Julian Davenport, looking slick and surrounded by a few other rich kids. He held a glass of champagne, looking down his nose at me with undisguised scorn. Mr. Vance spends his days studying recipes, so I'm sure he has some expert opinions on these five-star hotel pastries, right? His friends erupted in laughter. Julian, is this really him? The legendary Mr. Sterling? One of them asked, his hair slicked back with too much product. The one and only, Julian smirked, taking a sip of his drink. Isabella just has a soft spot for charity cases. She saw he was pathetic and decided to give him a meal ticket. Ha, what a philanthropist she is. So, Mr. Vance, how does it taste living off a woman? The taunts were like knives. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. And I knew that if I lost my temper, I would only make a scene and embarrass Isabella. I took a deep breath and looked up, a calm smile on my face. It's my pleasure to take care of my wife's well-being. My response was mild, but it left them momentarily speechless. Julian's face darkened. He clearly hadn't expected the spineless house husband to talk back. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. Don't push your luck, Leo. You think just because Isabella protects you, you're actually somebody. Let me tell you something. You're just a shield she used to fend off her grandfather. The second she and I get married, the very first thing I'm going to do is throw you out like the trash you are. His words were poison. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. The pain so intense I could barely breathe. Just as I was about to lose control, a cool, clear voice cut through the air like music. What are you all talking about? Isabella had appeared out of nowhere. She looped her arm through mine naturally, her gaze sweeping coolly over Julian and his posy. The smiles on their faces froze instantly. Isabella, we were just joking around with Leo, Julian stammered. Joking. Isabella's eyes narrowed and an intimidating aura emanated from her, making jokes at my husband's expense. Julian, who gave you the nerve? Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that could not be questioned. The temperature in our corner of the room plummeted. Julian's friends turned pale, not daring to make a sound. Julian's own face flushed red with humiliation. Isabella, I didn't mean it like that. Then what did you mean? She challenged, her eyes fixed on him. Tell me, what did you just say to my husband? Julian sputtered, unable to form a single word. Isabella let out a cold scoff, turning her attention from him to his friends. Let me be clear. My husband is not someone you people are qualified to judge. They all bowed their heads, avoiding her sharp gaze. In that moment, Isabella was like a lioness protecting her cub, radiating a powerful, untouchable energy. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel her hand on my arm, squeezing it gently. And one more thing, Isabella said, her eyes finally landing back on Julian, her tone as cold as ice. I want you to remember this, Julian. Leo Vance is my one and only legal husband. In the past, now, and in the future, if I ever hear you say another disrespectful word about him, you and I are done. We won't even be friends. With that, she turned, pulling me with her, and walked toward the center of the ballroom without a backward glance at Julian, whose face was now the color of spoiled liver. Every eye in the room was on us. I could feel the shock, the confusion, the envy. I felt like I was under 1,000 spotlights. But for the first time, I felt perfectly calm because Isabella was by my side. She led me to the stage, took the microphone from the MC, and cleared her throat. Her cool voice filled the entire hall. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to celebrate the anniversary of Sterling Industries. Tonight, I'd like to take this opportunity to formally introduce the gentleman standing beside me. She turned to look at me, and in her icy eyes for the very first time I saw a ripple of genuine tender warmth. His name is Leo Vance. He is my love and he is my husband. I know there's been a lot of speculation about our marriage. Tonight, I want to set the record straight. The single best decision I have ever made in my life was not taking Sterling Industries public, nor was it signing some billion-dollar deal. It was marrying him 3 years ago. He may not come from a prominent family or possess incredible wealth, but in my eyes, he is better than any man in this world. Because of him, I can fight my battles in the boardroom without any worries. Because of him, my cold, empty apartment finally feels like a home. He is my rock, my strongest supporter, and the only person I want to come home to for the rest of my life. Her words broadcast over the speakers silenced the entire room. Everyone was stunned, completely blindsided by her sudden, heartfelt declaration, and I, standing beside her, felt my mind go completely blank. I stared at her at the undisguised affection and conviction in her eyes, feeling like I was in a dream. Was she professing her love for me? Here in front of everyone, my heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of my chest. In the audience, Julian's expression was beyond ugly. It was a twisted mask of jealousy, rage, and disbelief. Chloe's jaw had dropped, her champagne flute nearly slipping from her hand. The Sterling relatives all looked equally dumbfounded. Then, under the shocked gazes of everyone in the room, Isabella rose onto her toes and gently, softly pressed a kiss to my cheek. It was soft and it carried her light, clean scent. In that instant, my world exploded into fireworks. On the way home after the gala, the car was silent. The driver focused on the road while Isabella and I sat in the back. She seemed exhausted, leaning back against the seat with her eyes closed, her long lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. My heart was still racing. I could almost feel the lingering warmth of her lips on my skin. Everything that had happened at the party felt like an unreal movie replaying in my mind. Were her words genuine, or was it all just an elaborate performance to finally cut ties with Julian? I didn't dare ask. I was afraid the answer would send me plummeting back to earth. Just as I was lost in thought, Isabella opened her eyes. "What are you thinking about?" Her voice was soft, a little hoarse with fatigue. "In nothing," I stuttered. She turned to look at me, the passing city lights flickering across her face, making her expression unreadable. "Leo," she said quietly, as if reading my mind. Every single word I said at the party was true. My breath caught in my throat. I whipped my head around to look at her, searching her face for any hint that she was joking. There was none. Her eyes were sincere and open. "Why?" The word came out raspy. I knew it was a stupid question, but I couldn't stop myself. A small, self-deprecating smile touched her lips. "You probably think someone like me is cold-blooded, and capable of love, right?" I shook my head. The truth is, they were right. She sighed. "Growing up, my father taught me there are no emotions in business, only interests. And marriage was just another tool for consolidating power. I always resisted it, saw it as a burden. 3 years ago, while my grandfather was dying, he emotionally blackmailed me into this. I had no choice but to agree to a contract marriage. I chose you because your background was the simplest. Clean. You wouldn't cause any trouble. I thought we could just be business partners, calmly and rationally fulfilling a contract." Her gaze drifted down to my hands, which were calloused from years of housework. "But I was wrong," she said, her voice becoming incredibly soft. "For these 3 years, you've woken up at 6 every morning to make me a different breakfast. You remember my cycle and have hot water bottles and tea ready for me without me ever saying a word. When I come home late, no matter how late, there's always a light on for me. And a warm meal waiting on the table. Once I had a terrible fever, I was completely delirious. You stayed by my side all night. When I woke up, you were asleep in the chair next to my bed with dark circles under your eyes. Another time, I drank too much in a networking event and got sick in the car. I thought you'd be disgusted, but you just quietly cleaned everything up, helped me to bed, and stayed up all night just to make sure I was okay." She was listing these tiny, insignificant things I had done, things I thought she never even noticed. "Do you know, Leo?" She continued, her voice trembling slightly. "In my entire life, no one has ever been so unconditionally good to me with no expectation of anything in return. My parents only cared about my grades and the company's stock price. My friends only cared about my family name and what I could do for them. Even Julian, his so-called love for me was tangled up in family expectations and business calculations. Only you. Your care was pure. It was warm. It was like a ray of light that slowly seeped into my cold, dark heart. I started looking forward to coming home every day, looking forward to your soup, looking forward to seeing you busy in the kitchen. I even started to get jealous of the ingredients because you gave them all your focus and tenderness. I became terrified of the contract ending. terrified that you would leave. I couldn't imagine life without your cooking, without the warmth you brought to that big empty apartment. I couldn't imagine how I would go on. So, when Julian showed up, when everyone assumed I would choose him, that's when I finally realized it. My heart already belonged to you. I love you, Leo, she whispered. Not because of a contract, not out of habit. I fell in love with you. Your gentleness, your kindness, your quiet care. By the time she finished, her cool, composed eyes were shimmering with a thin layer of tears. I was completely stunned. All this time, she had noticed. She had felt it all. What I thought was a one-sided crush was actually something real, something shared. An overwhelming wave of happiness washed over me, so powerful it almost knocked me over. I felt my own eyes begin to burn. I reached out, a trembling hand, wanting to touch her face. She didn't pull away. Instead, she took my hand and pressed it to her cheek. Her skin was cool against my burning palm. So, Leo, she said, looking at me with a vulnerability and hope I had never seen before. Let's not terminate the contract. Okay, let's be a real husband and wife for the rest of our lives. Okay? I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer. I nodded vigorously, my voice choked. Okay. The next second, I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. This woman I had loved for 3 silent years was finally truly in my arms that I could smell the subtle, clean scent of her hair and feel her slender body trembling with emotion. Outside the car, the city lights blurred into a river of stars. But my world, because of the person in my arms, was brighter than any galaxy. After we laid our hearts bare, everything changed. We were still sleeping in separate rooms. She insisted on giving me a chance to officially court her, saying I couldn't be let off that easy, but the invisible wall between us was gone. She started telling me about her day at work. We'd curl up on the sofa together and watch movies. Sometimes when I was cooking, she would sneak up behind me, wrap her arms around my waist, and rest her chin on my shoulder like a clingy cat. The employees at Sterling Industries went from being shocked to being envious. Even Chloe came over to offer a sincere, formal apology, admitting she'd been a blind idiot who almost ruined her best friend's happiness. Everything was moving in the right direction, except for Julian. After the gala, he disappeared for a while, but it wasn't long before he started trying to get close to Isabella again, this time under a different pretext. He founded an overseas investment firm and approached Isabella with a flashy proposal for a new green energy project, hoping to partner with Sterling Industries. Isabella, this project is the future. It's a guaranteed winner. If you invest, I promise you a return of at least 300% within 3 years. He pitched full of confidence in her office. Isabella had a sharp instinct for business. Though she now found Julian's character repulsive, she didn't reject the proposal outright. Business was business. That was her rule. She had her venture capital team evaluate the project. I don't know anything about business, but my gut told me something was wrong. Julian was too eager, too slick. There was a desperate greed in his eyes he couldn't hide. I warned Isabella. Be careful with this. I have a very bad feeling about Julian. She pinched my cheek and smiled. Don't worry, my sweet naive husband. Do you think your wife is that gullible? This is the big leagues. I would never risk my company's future. The analyst will give me a professional, unbiased report. I trusted her judgment, but the sense of unease wouldn't go away. I decided to do some digging myself. I might have been just a clerk, but in college, my best friend was a computer genius. I picked up a few hacking skills from him over the years. I was no expert, but I knew how to find information that wasn't on the surface. I spent my nights digging into Julian and his supposed overseas investment firm. What I found was chilling. His company was a shell corporation registered in a tax haven with no actual operations. His entire persona as a successful overseas elite was a complete fabrication. Using a few back channels, I managed to pull his financial records from abroad. The statements were horrifying. A long, devastating trail of transactions at high-stakes casinos in Las Vegas and Macau. He had gambled away an astronomical sum of money. I even found posts on underground forums offering a bounty for his location to collect on massive debts with his photo attached. He wasn't some triumphant success story. He was a gambling addict who had run out of road and returned to the States to pull a massive con. He was targeting Isabella and Sterling Industries, hoping to use this shared history to trick her into giving him a huge investment so he could pay his debts and disappear. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. He wasn't just trying to scam her. If he succeeded, he would shatter Sterling Industries' reputation and potentially its finances. I immediately compiled all the evidence and showed it to Isabella. As she scrolled through the sorted gambling records and debt collection notices, her beautiful face hardened into a mask of ice. "Good, very good," she said, her knuckles white as she gripped the mouse. Julian Davenport, he actually dared to try and play me. The look of cold fury in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. Julian was finished. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Isabella looked up at me, a cunning light in her eyes and a cold smile playing on her lips. "You want to put on a show? Fine. We'll give him the performance of a lifetime." She paused, then said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I'm going to make him pay for his greed and his stupidity." For the next few days, Isabella acted as if nothing was wrong. She had her team produce a glowing evaluation of the green energy project and informed Julian that Sterling Industries was extremely interested with a preliminary decision to invest $500 million. Julian was ecstatic. He thought his plan had worked perfectly. He started looking at me with that old familiar scorn again. At a dinner before the contract signing, he even had the audacity to say to me in front of Isabella, "Leo, once this project takes off, I'll cut you in for a small piece. Let you experience what it's like to earn your own money for a change instead of living off a woman." I just smiled and said nothing, silently pitying the poor fool. He had no idea he was a dead man walking. Isabella, for her part, was a picture of charm, even raising her glass to toast him. "To our future success, Julian." Her smile was as beautiful and deadly as a blooming poppy. Completely mesmerized, Julian downed his wine. "Don't you worry, Isabella. I won't let you down." The signing ceremony was scheduled for 3 days later at the Sterling Industries headquarters. Julian showed up looking slick and confident, his team, a few actors he hired for the day, in tow on our side. Isabella presided over the meeting, flanked by her top executives. She had insisted I sit right beside her. Julian frowned when he saw me, but didn't say anything. In his eyes, I was just a piece of furniture. The ceremony went smoothly. After the lawyers confirmed the contracts were in order, Isabella picked up her pen. Julian was practically vibrating with excitement, his greedy eyes glued to the tip of her pen. $500 million. As soon as she signed, the money would be wired to his offshore account. He could pay off his debts and still have hundreds of millions left to live out his days in luxury. But just as the nib of her pen was about to touch the paper, she stopped. She looked up at Julian, a sly smile on her face. "Julian, before I signed, I have a little gift for you." Julian froze. "A gift?" Isabella clapped her hands twice. The doors to the conference room burst open. Leading the way were several grim-faced police officers. Behind them was a group of menacing-looking men, the leader of which had a thick gold chain around his neck and a dragon tattoo snaking up his arm. The moment Julian saw them, the color drained from his face. "And Mr. Costello, what are you doing here?" he stammered, his legs buckling beneath him. The man called Costello strode forward and slapped Julian across the face so hard he spun around, blood trickling from his lip. "You piece of trash. You owe my casino in Vegas $30 million and you're here playing big shot. You really think we wouldn't find you?" The police immediately stepped in to control the situation. The lead detective flashed his badge. "Julian Davenport, you're under suspicion of contract fraud, illegal fundraising, and multiple other financial crimes. You need to come with us." Julian completely collapsed. He slumped to the floor, staring at Isabella in utter disbelief. "Isabella, you set me up." Isabella rose slowly to her feet and looked down at him, her expression devoid of any warmth, only pure glacial disgust. "Set you up, Julian? You're not even worth the effort." She walked over and threw a folder of documents in his face. All the evidence I had gathered on his sordid affairs abroad. "I was willing to give you a shred of dignity for the sake of our childhood," she said, her words cutting him to pieces. "But you were greedy and you targeted my company. And worse, you repeatedly insulted my husband. You crossed my line. Did you really think you were clever enough to pull this off? That I was that easy to fool? Your so-called project is riddled with holes. Today, I just decided to rip off your mask and let everyone see the pathetic man you really are." Julian's face was ashen, his body shaking uncontrollably. He knew it was over. He tried to crawl toward Isabella to beg. I stepped in front of her, blocking his path, and looked down at him coldly. "The game is over, Julian." An officer stepped forward and snapped a pair of cold steel handcuffs on his wrists. As they dragged him away, his eyes were filled with nothing but despair and venomous hatred. Mr. Costello and his men were also taken into custody for illegal debt collection and assault. The farce was finally over. Isabella walked to my side and took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. She looked at me, her eyes shining like stars. Let's go home, my hero. Julian Davenport was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to life in prison. He would spend the rest of his days behind bars. Our life finally returned to normal. But it was a new kind of normal filled with a sweetness I had never known. The contract, that symbol of our past, was personally fed into the office shredder by Isabella. From now on, she declared, there's no contract between us. Only a marriage certificate. I finally officially moved into the master bedroom. One Sunday afternoon, the sunlight streamed into the kitchen where I was making dinner. Isabella, wearing an adorable pair of bunny pajamas, snuck in. "What smells so good?" she murmured, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind and nuzzling her head against my back like a kitten. "Sweet and sour pork." "You've been asking for it all week," I said with a smile, not pausing in my chopping. "Yay, you're the best husband ever," she chirped, planting a happy kiss on my cheek. Since our relationship had changed, she had unlocked a new talent for affection, and she was getting very good at it. The ruthless ice queen of the boardroom was in front of me, a pouty, playful woman who loved to be spoiled. "Get out of here before you get splattered with oil," I said, patting her hand affectionately. "Go watch TV." "No, I want to watch you," she wed. "Watching you cook is the happiest thing in the world." As she spoke, she snaked a hand past me and stole a freshly fried piece of pork from the plate, popping it in her mouth before I could stop her. "Ow, hot," she yelled, hopping from foot to foot, but still managing to mumble through a full mouth, "So good." I laughed, shaking my head as I poured her glass of cold water. Seeing her flushed, happy face, my heart melted into a puddle. This was it. This was the happiness I had always dreamed of. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was right here in this kitchen, filled with the scent of a home-cooked meal, making dinner for the woman I loved. The sweet and sour sauce bubbled in the wok, its tangy aroma filling the air. Outside, the sunset painted the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. I turned and looked into her sparkling eyes, then leaned down and kissed her. The kiss tasted faintly of sweet and sour pork, and it was the sweetest thing I had ever known. Isabella pointed out that despite being married for 3 years, we had never been on a proper date. To fix this, she booked an entire private movie theater for us to watch my favorite sci-fi film. The movie was great, but I could barely focus. Isabella was attached to me like a koala the entire time, demanding popcorn, then soda, then kisses. When the credits rolled and the lights came up, I thought the date was over. But as I started to get up, Isabella put a hand on my arm. "Wait," she whispered, winking mysteriously. "There's one more surprise." The massive screen flickered back to life, but it wasn't a movie trailer. It was a video montage. It started with a clip of me on my first day at the Alien Tower looking awkward and out of place. Then it cut to clips of me in the kitchen, a blur of motion, me tending to the plants on the balcony, me waiting for her late at night, having fallen asleep on the sofa. It was a collection of moments, big and small, from my life over the past 3 years. I turned to her, shocked. "I had the housekeeper install security cameras," she admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly. "I was so busy back then, and I didn't know how to ask if you were okay, so I just wanted to see what you did all day. And somewhere along the way, watching you became my favorite part of the day." The video ended on a still frame from the gala. The moment she had stood on her toes to kiss my cheek. Then text appeared on the screen. "Mr. Leo Vance, 3 years ago, I tricked you into being my husband with a contract. Today, will you marry me again for a lifetime?" At that moment, all the lights in the theater came on. I saw that it was filled with people. The Sterling family, my friends, our colleagues. All of them were smiling. Chloe pushed a huge cake down the aisle and Isabella, my Isabella, pulled a small velvet box from her purse. She opened it to reveal a stunning, brilliant diamond ring, a man's ring. She looked up at me, her eyes, once as cold as frost, now filled with all the stars in the sky. "Leo," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Marry me for real this time." Tears I didn't know I was holding back streamed down my face. I didn't answer with words. I pulled her into my arms and gave her my answer with a deep, passionate kiss that left no room for doubt. The theater erupted in thunderous applause and cheers. I knew in that moment that I was no longer a shadow husband living in a contract. I was Isabella Sterling's husband,